Buenas tardes. Hace 3 meses la Fundación Torres de Vera me elevó un memorándum solicitando aportar nuevas carreras, especialmente de 2 años, para renovar el stock que existe en la misma y la cual consideraban ya un poco pasadas de moda, por decirlo así. Prefería hacer otro trabajo mucho más profundo porque el cambio no se reduce a cambiar las carreras o a agregar carreras nuevas o más cortas o cambiar el precio. El cambio debe ser mucho más profundo y en un momento en que estamos pasando a una nueva, o ya estamos en una nueva e importante revolución de nuestra época. Ya lo veremos en este video.
Las nuevas carreras y la nueva capacitación exigen primero una nueva visión del conocimiento, un cambio de actitud y de aptitud del educador y del educando. Este conflicto lleva casi ya 2 siglos. En nuestro medio se hizo patente en el conflicto entre el presidente Sarmiento y nuestro antepasado, el gobernador José Miguel Guastavino, hacia 1865. El subjetivismo y la revolución industrial impusieron un modelo hasta hoy vigente y que debe ser revisado en profundidad. De eso se trata este video. Algunas ideas directrices que nos ayuden a repensar la educación. Pierden vigencia profesiones y carreras. Necesitamos nuevas. Pero primero,
Even more
lo primero.
concerning is the education that the balance of people are getting. Not only has that been weak, it's getting weaker. And if you look at the economy, it really is only providing opportunities now to people with a better education. And so we have to change this. We have to change it so that people have equal opportunity. We have to change it so that the country is strong.
Reunimos opiniones y posturas de científicos y líderes tecnológicos del siglo y tratamos de derribar tabúes educativos indestructibles.
What are the characteristics of this top quartile? What do they look like? You might think, well, these must be very senior teachers. And the answer is no. Once somebody is taught for 3 years, their teaching quality does not change thereafter. The variation is very, very small. You might think, well, these are people with master's degrees. They've gone back and they've gotten their master's of education. This chart takes 4 different factors and says how much do they explain teaching quality. That bottom thing, which says there's no effect at all, is a master's degree.
La pregunta de fondo es, ¿se puede estandarizar la educación y más aún la educación en la actualidad? El acto del conocimiento, el acto cognitivo, ¿Es eminentemente individual o grupal? Esas son las preguntas que debemos reformularnos.
Por la distinción entre cultura científica y cultura humanística. Una concepción tradicional involucra la oposición entre las humanidades y la ciencia. Una concepción moderna de la cultura nos dice que la ciencia, los estudios sociales deberían ser científicos. Ahí no hay ninguna oposición. Naturalmente
The educational system?
The educational system.
No way.
No, the education.
Not prepared at all.
The educational.
That's a change.
I don't know your system, but I
Yeah.
bet it's not very different from our system. The best way to understand what our public education system is to go back to how it got started. In the 1800s in the United States, you had most young people were children of farmers. They worked on in the fields. And when somebody proposed that America institute a system of public education for all young people, the parents of the poor parents said, no, we can't allow our kids to go to school. They need to work, otherwise we starve. We don't have enough hands to work in the fields. So they opposed public education. The people who favored it were wealthy, and the people who made it happen were business. In the late 1800s, the business community said, you know what, all these kids are coming into the factory, but they're coming from the farms, and they're not good factory workers. You know what, they come late to work. You can't count on them. They're not good. What we need, they said, and these are the actual words that they used in English, you translate them, quote, we want a system that will create, quote, industrial discipline, end quote. What was industrial discipline? Industrial discipline meant you showed up on time. And you did the same work again and again and again and again, just as you did schools that actually resemble the factory. If you look at our schools even today, they simulate factories. Kids have to arrive on time. Why is that? Because in the field, if you come late, it doesn't matter. They're working at home, or they work at different hours, strange hours, and so forth, and you don't need everybody showing up at exactly the same time. So what we have are schools that were literally designed to provide the workforce for an industrial age economy. And I was waiting for years, I mean, I've been saying this, both Heidi and I have been making this speech for years and years and years, but we were waiting for Bill Gates to say
this
something.
amount of increase. And so they're deeply engaged in making teaching better. When you actually go and sit in one of these classrooms, at first it's very bizarre. I sat down and I thought, what is going on? The teacher was running around and the energy level's high. I thought, well, I'm in the sports rally or something. What's going on? And the teacher was constantly scanning to see which kids weren't paying attention, which kids were bored, and calling on kids rapidly, putting things up on the board. It was a very dynamic environment because particularly in those middle school years, 5th or 8th grade, keeping people engaged and setting the tone that everybody in the classroom needs to pay attention. Nobody gets to make fun of it or have the position of, you know, the kid who doesn't want to be there. How does that compare to a normal school? Well, in a normal school, teachers aren't told how good they are. The data isn't gathered. In the teacher's contract, it will limit the number of times the principal can come into the classroom, sometimes to once per year. And they need advance notice to do that. So imagine running a factory where you've got these workers, some of them just making crap, and the management is told, hey, you can only come down here once a year, but you need to let us know because we might actually fool you and try and do a good job in that one brief moment. Even a teacher who wants to improve doesn't have the tools to do it. They don't have the test
2 years ago,
scores.
he finally said the right words. He said, we cannot reform our education system, we must replace it. And he is right, because the system is designed, as I said, to prepare people for yesterday, not for tomorrow. Now, that's an extremely difficult and painful disaster today. And therefore, we're going to see battles about education in country after country after country until this system is broken.
El constructivismo y el relativismo no son nuevos, no son emergentes, se han puesto de moda, pero el subjetivismo comenzó a comienzos de la edad moderna. ¿Por qué son enemigos de la ciencia básica? Porque niegan la posibilidad de alcanzar la verdad. El constructivismo y el relativismo no han producido un solo conocimiento nuevo acerca de la sociedad o de la naturaleza. Al contrario, han sido obstáculos importantes.
¿Qué nos puede decir sobre el constructivismo pedagógico?
Que es un desastre. El constructivismo pedagógico es la hipótesis según la cual los niños pueden descubrir todas las ciencias por sí mismos, sin guía de ningún tipo.
Like religion and money and other things. So I have a big interest in education, and I think we all do. We have a huge vested interest in it, partly because it's education that's meant to take us into this future that we can't grasp. If you think of it, children starting school this year will be retiring in 2065. Nobody has a clue, despite all the expertise that's been on parade for the past 4 days, what the world will look like in 5 years' time. And yet we're meant to be educating them for it. So the unpredictability, I think, is extraordinary. And the third part of this is that we've all agreed, nonetheless, on the really extraordinary capacities that children have, their capacities for innovation. I had a great story recently, I love telling it, of a little girl who was in a drawing lesson. She was 6 and she was at the back drawing, and the teacher said this little girl hardly ever paid attention, and in this drawing lesson she did. And the teacher was fascinated. She went over to her and she said, "What are you drawing?" And the girl said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the girl said, "They will in a minute."
They tested us, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 15? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting...
What these things have in common is that kids will take a chance. You know, if they don't know, they'll have a go. Am I right? They're not frightened of being wrong. Now, I don't mean to say that being wrong is the same thing as being creative. What we do know is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. If you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity.